English translation 699th contact Saturday the 13th of January 2018, 21:58 hours.
Ah, welcome and greetings, Florena. Be welcome. And thanks for coming so quickly.
Allow yourself, dear father friend, greetings. What's the matter that you called me?
I did not mean to rush you, because it is just that I have a question or two that I am sure you can answer, because I have been asked a number of things to give answers to. As I know, all of you, just all of you who are active here on Earth, are aware of everything and all knowledge that is related to official and unofficial contact conversations, as well as all aspects, facts and information, etc., that also run alongside.
That is indeed so, because it is necessary for us to be informed about all things.
Then, of course, you also know everything in relation to the matter when, in the early 1980s, I was instructed to instruct the American to submit your play-RN request for a request or an attempt for a mediation contact to the U.S. government, which, however, was then thwarted by the state powers of the USA and their megalomania with impossible, stupid, sick, self-important, erroneous, and unfulfillable demands.
I am aware of how this fact was also disseminated planet-wide here on Era, and therefore all peoples were informed in this regard, because they had previously given their consent to such an undertaking in its entirety. The rejection of the request was met with an extremely great lack of understanding far and wide.
Good. Then I now have a question here on this, which I have already answered myself, although there are two other questions which relate to something else, and which I have also answered. If it is all right with you, I will read it all out to you.
Please?
Good, thanks. Then here's the whole thing that was asked and what I wrote in response.
Question: when can a human being be called righteous?
Answer: the answer comprises, in the old-fashioned way, 33 points, which, however, can be carried on at will according to reason and reasonableness. What is a righteous human being? A human being can be called just if he fulfills all his duties worthy of a human being, when he cultivates peace and also lives it, when he generously grants freedom to human beings in every respect, if he rejects all evil, them, all unjust and evil, all dishonesty, if he consciously avoids all harm against fellow human beings, the systems of nature and the fauna and flora, if he loves and cultivates all that is good and positive, if he lives in true love, grows and always develops in this respect, if he leads his life in all-round righteousness, if he is free from personal evil, negative and harmful intentions and interests, if he is completely pure in conscience, if he cultivates charity/love for fellow human beings and love for nature and its fauna and flora, if he cultivates a clear and clean conscience, if he is not addicted to material wealth, if he cultivates order and cleanliness in all things, if he lives in a good way according to the creational laws and precepts, if he uses his consciousness in a creative way for personal evolution, if he is honorable and dignified in his senses, aspirations and actions and lives these values in this way, if he avoids all destruction of nature and its fauna and flora, if he is helpful in every possible way to his fellow human beings, to nature and its fauna and flora, if he consciously cultivates virtues and also lives them out in every conceivable situation, if he uses the gifts and possibilities of his consciousness for personal and fellow human evolution, if he gives his language a clear, instructive and understandable expression, when he gives honor and dignity to the ineffable beauty of the whole universal creation, when he pays tribute to the full value and grace of all creative treasures and their sublimity, when he consciously expresses his thanks for and cares for his life in a venerable manner, when he contemplatively and honorably appreciates all that is creative as the principal forces of all existence, when he recognizes the creation universe as such and brings all honor and dignity to it, if he is always helpful with regard to the well-being of human beings and all life forms, if, in spite of possessing many material goods, he does not exalt himself above his fellow men, full of intellect, reason and logic, he judges and acts upon existing human rights and laws, despite the power granted to him, he remains responsibly modest, decent and with integrity. If he enlightens his consciousness with the light and the teaching of the truth, spirit, and life, if he thinks and lives not according to a belief, but according to creative reality and its truth.
Question. The time mentioned by Hylock is at present, I think.
Answer. The origin of the teaching concerning the righteousness of human beings goes back to Nocedemian, whereby this teaching is included in the teaching of truth, teaching of the spirit, teaching of life, and its dissemination began from 1942.
Question concerns landing of extraterrestrial intelligences.
Answer. A public landing of extraterrestrials at the beginning of the 21st century, whereby the appearance of the extraterrestrials was announced in the contact reports, but their nature and origin and also the exact time were only mentioned unofficially, was planned for the 10th year of the new millennium, should not have taken place by the consciousness advanced Playaran, but by Playaran, Federates called up on call for preparation and standing by. This, in addition to other extraterrestrials who were to come openly to Earth, of which there was already talk, earlier during contact conversations, but which was prevented by interventions of the Playaran because the hostile and warlike developments of the human beings were too dangerous to Earth, which they still are and will also be far into the future. The aliens who were to land openly on Earth at the beginning of the third millennium, namely in the USA, would not have been the Playaran themselves, but members of the Playaran Federation. This is because they have a simpler and more simple development of consciousness than the Playaran themselves, which means that they, in contrast to the Playaran, could have easily entered the direct sphere of the human beings of Earth in order to communicate and work with them. The whole thing was to be done by first contacting the U.S. government through me, Billy, and through an American intermediary, on the condition and precondition that the USA would have responded to a request from the Playaran corresponding to the aforementioned matter in the early 1980s. This was to be done, as explained, through the mediation of my personality in order to submit political and world peace promoting guidelines and advice, etc., to the USA through the Playaran. These should have been considered by the state leaders of the United States of America, and their results implemented peacefully in the countries dependent on and under the control of the USA all over the world, in order to create effective peace and real freedom for all peoples worldwide. If at that time the state powers of the USA and their megalomania had not reacted with nonsensical and for the Playaran unfulfillable primitive stupid demands, when my U.S. middleman submitted the Playaran request to the U.S. government, then in case of success also the then still existing Soviet Union and also China, Switzerland, as well as the then incipient EU dictatorship would have been included. In this way, a worldwide process of peace and freedom and the abolition of dictatorships as well as the establishment of fully democratic government structures would have begun under the advisory supervision of the Playaran and through the work of their federates. Furthermore, through ongoing Playaran advisory assistance, the whole would certainly have become a state of peace and freedom encompassing the world and all earthly states within 2.5 decades, which would also have led to the power of determination of the peoples in political and military matters and to the end of all acts of hostility to war on Earth. This would have created the basic prerequisite for a public landing of a delegation of peaceable Playaran federates, for whom it was decided and determined that they would have had to assist earthly humanity with advice and action in every conceivable good and positive way. However, since the state leaders of the USA, in their delusions of grandeur with regard to their insane, pathologically stupid, nonsensical, confused, self-important and power-driven demands, ruined everything from the outset and condemned it to failure, the plan of the Playaran to make an attempt to establish contact with the authoritative earthly governments was shelved again. However, It was left open to them, and they waited a whole 20 years to see whether those who were active at the time or those who followed them in the USA would come to their senses and respond in the affirmative. But this was not the case. As a result, the whole program of the attempt to establish contact was finally discarded, and the Plejaren closed everything down and declared unofficially that no further attempt of this kind would be made, and that they would therefore also not declare themselves ready for a second attempt, even if the U.S. government should still come forward today or in the future.
As I know all the facts in this regard, your answer corresponds with every word to the given facts, which, however, were never dealt with in openly held conversations.
Yes, because like many other things, facts and happenings and so on, this whole thing, as well as related factors and so on, was only ever dealt with in conversations in a private way. For me, it was always just to keep quiet, as I had learnt to do with Svath, with Ptah's father. But now I would like to thank you for coming here so quickly to clarify whether what I have written from memory is also correct.
I was very happy to do that, but now I have to go back because I have to continue with my duty, which I only interrupted to answer your call. Farewell, dear father friend.
Again, many thanks and goodbye.